The stench of desperation and broken dreams hung heavy in the air of Nexus Station's infamous acquisition hall. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn trader's jacket as he surveyed the crowd of buyers, smugglers, and opportunists gathered for the weekly distressed assets auction. The hall's flickering neon signs cast sickly colors across faces that had seen too much of the galaxy's darker corners. Lot 47, announced Vex Mortalli, the station's notorious auction master. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the detention cage being wheeled onto the platform. One Etherean female, former nobility, combat-trained but clearly past her prime. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus felt his breath catch as the cage's energy field shimmered away, revealing the prisoner within. Even in chains and wearing the gray coveralls of a detention facility, she was breathtaking. Her skin held the characteristic pale blue luminescence of the Etherean people, and her silver hair fell in waves despite obvious neglect. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Brilliant violet orbs that burned with unbroken defiance despite her circumstances. Zara Velnathi, Vex continued, consulting his datapad with theatrical relish. Formerly Lady Zara of House Velnathi, one of the great noble families of Ethereos. Convicted of treason against the Etherean Empire after her house fell during the recent political restructuring. The crowd murmured with interest, but Marcus detected the underlying skepticism. Ethereans were known for their psychic abilities and technological prowess, but fallen nobility was often more burden than asset. Their pride made them difficult slaves, and their enemies were numerous. Her psychic abilities were reportedly severed. As part of her sentence, Vex added with a cruel smile. So you're getting the exotic beauty without the mental interference. Perfect for private collections or specialized entertainment venues. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He'd heard of the barbaric practice. Psychic severance was worse than death for an Etherean. It left them alive but cut off from the mental networks that were as natural to them as breathing. The fact that she was still standing, still defiant, spoke to an inner strength that commanded his respect. Now then, Vex raised his gavel. What am I bid for this fallen star? Do I hear 50,000 credits to start? Silence. Marcus scanned the crowd, noting the mixture of leers and dismissive glances. A few buyers seemed mildly interested, but no hands rose. Come now. Vex's voice took on a mocking tone. 40,000? 30? Surely someone wants to add Etherean nobility to their collection? Still nothing. Marcus realized with growing disgust that the crowd was waiting for the price to drop. They saw her as damaged goods, a curiosity to be picked up cheaply, rather than a person deserving of dignity. 20,000 credits? Vex's cybernetic eye flickered with annoyance. For a genuine Etherean noble, you won't find another at any price. A corpulent Hutt crime lord in the front row made a dismissive gesture with his tentacle, and several other buyers openly laughed. The humiliation was intentional. Vex enjoyed watching the mighty fall. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Through it all, Zara stood, motionless, her violet eyes fixed on some point beyond the crowd. Marcus wondered what she saw there. What gave her the strength to endure this degradation with such composure? Despite everything that had been done to her, she radiated a quiet dignity that put her tormentors to shame. 10,000? Vex's voice cracked with frustration. Come now, she's worth that for the novelty alone. No response. The crowd was content to wait, sensing blood in the water. 5,000 credits. Vex slammed his gavel on the podium. This is robbery. A genuine Etherean noble for 5,000? Still silence. Marcus felt sick watching the systematic destruction of this woman's dignity. Whatever crimes she'd been convicted of, no sentient being deserved this. 1,000 credits, Vex's voice rose to a shout. Final call. 1,000 for the former Lady of House Velnathi. The crowd remained motionless, enjoying the spectacle. Marcus realized they would wait until Vex was forced to practically give her away. Then someone would claim her for almost nothing. Very well. Vex raised his gavel with obvious disgust. If there are no bids, she'll be processed as unclaimed property and sent to the labor camps of 1,000,000 credits. The words left Marcus's mouth before he'd consciously decided to speak. The hall fell silent, every head turning to locate the source of the impossible bid. Vex's cybernetic eye spun frantically as it focused on Marcus. "I'm sorry, did you say 1,000,000? 1,000,000 credits," Marcus repeated, stepping forward through the crowd. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his voice remained steady. "For Lady Zara Velnathi." The auction hall erupted in laughter. Vex's organic eye gleamed with malicious amusement while his cybernetic one performed a full scan of Marcus. "My dear fellow," Vex's voice dripped with condescension, "I admire your enthusiasm, but according to my scans, you're Marcus Chen, independent trader, barely rated for minor cargo runs. Your entire net worth wouldn't cover a tenth of that bid." More laughter from the crowd. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but forced himself to remain calm. On the platform, Zara's violet eyes had found his, and he saw something flicker in their depths, surprise, perhaps even the faintest hint of hope. "Verify my account," Marcus said simply, pulling out his credit chip. Vex's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance. "Very well, let's end this charade quickly." He gestured to a security droid, which scanned Marcus's chip with a handheld device. The droid's optical sensors flashed as it processed the data. Then it spoke in its flat, mechanical voice. "Account verified. Available balance, 1,743,216 credits." The laughter died instantly. Vex's mouth fell open, his cybernetic eye clicking rapidly as it tried to process this impossible information. That can't be right," Vex stammered, snatching the scanner from the droid. His face went pale as he read the display. "How does a small-time trader have this kind of money?" Marcus shrugged, maintaining his casual demeanor despite the chaos in his chest. "Good investments, lucky runs. Does it matter? I have the credits, and I'm bidding 1,000,000 for the lady." But that's insane," Vex sputtered. "She's damaged, severed from her abilities. You could buy a dozen prime specimens for that price." "I want this one," Marcus said firmly, his eyes meeting Zara's across the hall. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended the sordid circumstances of their meeting. The crowd stirred uneasily. Several buyers who had shown no interest suddenly seemed to reconsider, whispering among themselves. The Hutt crime lord's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Well?" Vex struggled to regain his composure. "If there are no other bids, going once, for 1,000,000, 2,000,000, rumbled the Hutt, his translator rendering his speech in monotone. "If the human thinks she's worth such a price, perhaps I underestimated her value." A cold smile spread across Marcus's face. 3,000,000. The hall gasped. Even Vex looked stunned by the escalating bids. 4,000,000, the Hutt countered, his massive bulk shifting on his repulsor platform. 10,000,000, Marcus said quietly, "Duvo." Silence that followed was deafening. The Hutt's tiny eyes narrowed to slits, but after a long moment, he made a dismissive gesture and turned away. No other bidders dared challenge such an astronomical sum. Vex's hands shook as he raised his gavel. 10,000,000 credits, going once, going twice. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned hall. "Sold to Marcus Chen for 10,000,000 credits." As the crowd began to disperse in shocked murmurs, Marcus made his way to the processing station. His legs felt unsteady. He'd just spent his entire fortune and then some on a complete stranger. But when he looked up at Zara's face and saw the gratitude and wonder there, he knew he'd made the right choice. The transaction took nearly an hour to complete, requiring multiple verifications and the involvement of the station's senior financial officers. Through it all, Zara waited in her cage, those violet eyes never leaving his face. Finally, the energy field dissolved, and she was free. She stepped out slowly, gracefully, despite the shackles still around her wrists. Marcus moved to unlock them, but she stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Wait," she said, and her voice was like music, melodic and haunting despite the obvious strain. "Before you remove these chains, I need to know why. Why would a human spend such a fortune on a broken Etherean?" Marcus studied her face, seeing the vulnerability hidden beneath her composed exterior. "Because you're not broken," he said simply. "And because no one else saw your worth." Something shifted in her violet eyes, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. "I am severed from my people, cut off from the song that connects all Ethereans. I cannot touch the minds of others or feel their presence. I am hollow." "No," Marcus said firmly, reaching for her shackles. "You're free." The chains fell away with a soft clink, and for the first time since entering the hall, Zara smiled. It transformed her face, revealing the true beauty that lay not in her exotic features, but in her indomitable spirit. "What happens now?" she asked as they walked toward the exit. Marcus paused, suddenly aware that he hadn't thought beyond the auction. He'd bankrupted himself to save a woman he didn't know, and now they both faced an uncertain future together. "Now," he said, offering her his arm, "we figure it out together." As they left the acquisition hall behind, neither noticed the shadowy figure that detached itself from the crowd to follow them, or the encrypted message being transmitted to unknown recipients across the galaxy. The auction was over, but their real challenges were just beginning. Marcus's modest quarters aboard the merchant vessel Stellar Wanderer felt impossibly cramped with Zara's presence filling the space. She moved with fluid grace despite her obvious exhaustion, her violet eyes taking in every detail of his ship with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating assets and threats. "It's not much," Marcus said, suddenly self-conscious about the cramped living space, the patched bulkheads, and the jury-rigged systems that kept his aging vessel operational. "But it's home." Zara ran her fingers along the navigation console, her expression thoughtful. "She's older than she appears. Corellian design, but heavily modified. You've done extensive work on the hyperdrive motivator." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Most people wouldn't notice those details." "I was trained to manage my family's merchant fleet," she replied, settling into the co-pilot's chair with obvious relief. "Before, everything changed. Velnathi ships carried Etherean crystals to every corner of the galaxy. We had one of the largest private fleets in known space. The weight of what she'd lost hung heavy in the recycled air." Marcus busied himself with the pre-flight checklist, trying to give her space to process, while his mind raced with questions he didn't dare ask yet. "Where are we going?" Zara asked as the Wanderer's engines hummed to life. Marcus paused, his hands hovering over the navigation controls. The truth was, he had no idea. "Away from here, for now. The Outer Rim has plenty of places to lay low while we figure things out." "We." She said the word like she was testing its weight. "You realize you've just made yourself a target by association? The Etherean Empire has a long reach, and there are those who would pay handsomely for information about my whereabouts." "Let them come," Marcus replied, more confidently than he felt. The Wanderer broke free of Nexus Station's docking clamps and began moving toward the hyperspace transit lanes. "I've dealt with worse." Zara's melodic laugh held little humor. "Have you? The Etherean Inquisition doesn't simply kill traitors, Marcus. They erase them. Mind, body, and soul, as if they never existed at all." A chill ran down Marcus's spine, but he kept his expression neutral. "Good thing you're not with the Empire anymore, then." As they entered hyperspace, the familiar blue-white tunnel of twisted starlight surrounding them, Marcus finally allowed himself to relax slightly. They were safe for now, but he needed answers. "Can I ask what really happened?" he said carefully. "To your family, I mean. The auction master mentioned treason, but..." Zara was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of profound loss. "The Etherean Empire is ruled by the Circle of Minds, 12 of the most powerful psychics in our society. For generations, they've maintained absolute control through their mental networks, reading thoughts, predicting rebellions before they begin." She stared out at the hyperspace tunnel, her violet eyes distant. "My father discovered they were planning something called the Great Silence." Which was? The systematic severing of every Etherean not born into the noble houses. They intended to create a two-caste society, the connected, who who could access the song, and the silent, who would serve as little more than biological automatons. Marcus felt sick. Your father tried to stop them. He tried to warn people. House Velnathi controlled major trade routes. We had influence, resources, connections throughout the galaxy. Father believed he could rally opposition to the Circle's plan. Zara's hands clenched in her lap. He was wrong. The Circle had been monitoring our communications for months. They knew about our resistance network before we even began recruiting. The treason charges were cover for a purge. Within a week, every major house that might have opposed them was destroyed. Leaders executed, families scattered, assets seized. The Circle announced that we had been plotting to sell Etherean secrets to alien governments, a convenient excuse to eliminate their opposition. Marcus processed this information, understanding now why someone would pay 10 million credits for a former Etherean noble. You have knowledge they want suppressed. More than that. Zara turned to face him, and he saw fear flicker in her violet eyes for the first time. I know where my father hid the data cores containing evidence of the Great Silence. Proof of what they planned, names of collaborators, details of the technology they developed to perform mass severance, information that could destroy the Circle of minds. The Wanderer shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace near a remote asteroid field. Marcus had chosen the location randomly from his nav computer, but now he wondered if anywhere would be safe enough for what Zara was telling him. And they think you'll try to retrieve this evidence? They know I will, she said simply. It's the only way to stop them. The Great Silence wasn't abandoned when they eliminated the opposition. It was simply delayed. They're still planning to sever billions of my people, turning them into willing slaves. Marcus stared at her, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd gotten himself involved in. Where are these data cores hidden? Zara hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Kepler 442b, a dead world in the frontier sectors. My father established a hidden research facility there, disguised as a xenoarchaeology site. The cores are buried deep in the ancient ruins. Then that's where we're going, Marcus said, already plotting coordinates. It's not that simple. Zara shook her head. The facility is protected by automated defenses calibrated to Etherean psychic signatures. Without my abilities, I can't access it. And even if I could, the journey to Kepler 442b takes us through 3 different sectors, controlled by bounty hunters who would recognize me. Marcus leaned back in his pilot's chair, considering the problems. What if we could restore your abilities? Impossible. Psychic severance is irreversible. The neural pathways are destroyed, not just blocked. Maybe for Etherean medicine, Marcus said thoughtfully. But humans have a different approach to neurological damage. We rebuild rather than regenerate. Hope flickered in Zara's eyes before she forced it down. You're talking about cybernetic implants. They might restore some basic telepathic function, but the cost would be enormous, and the technology barely exists outside of experimental research. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then activated his comm system. The holographic display showed an incoming message indicator. Someone had been trying to reach him while they were in hyperspace. The message was from Dr. Sarah Chen, his sister. Marcus? Sarah's familiar face appeared in the hologram, her expression worried. I got your transfer authorization for the research fund. 10 million credits? What the hell is going on? I know you said to use the money for anything that might help, but this is our entire inheritance from Dad. Please tell me you haven't done something stupid. Zara looked between Marcus and the hologram with dawning understanding. The money you spent at the auction was supposed to fund my sister's neural research, Marcus finished. She's developing cybernetic interfaces for treating psychic trauma in alien species. Experimental work, but promising. You spent your sister's research funding to buy my freedom, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do that? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Because some things are more important than money, and because I think we can help each other. Before Zara could respond, the Wanderer's proximity alarms began blaring. Marcus spun toward the sensor display, his blood running cold at what he saw. 3 sleek ships had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the asteroid field. Etherean designs, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive psychic conductive metals of their civilization. Imperial Inquisition vessels, Zara breathed, her face going pale. They found us faster than I expected. Marcus's hands flew over the controls, bringing the Wanderer's systems online. How? We were careful, used random jump coordinates. The auction, Zara realized. Vex Mortalli. He must have tagged me with a biotracer during processing. They've been tracking us since we left Nexus Station. The comm system crackled to life, and a cold, emotionless voice filled the cabin. Attention, merchant vessel. You are harboring a convicted traitor to the Etherean Empire. Surrender Lady Velnathi immediately, and you will be permitted to depart unharmed. Marcus looked at Zara, seeing the resignation in her violet eyes. She was preparing to sacrifice herself to save him. Not happening, he said firmly, engaging the ship's engines. Hold on. The Wanderer lurched forward, diving into the asteroid field as particle beams lanced through space where they'd been moments before. Marcus threw the ship into a tight spiral around a massive asteroid, using its bulk to shield them from the pursuing vessels. They're faster than us, Zara observed, watching the tactical display as the Inquisition ships closed the distance with frightening speed. And their weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. They want me alive. Then we use that against them, Marcus replied, threading the Wanderer through a narrow canyon between two tumbling asteroids. My ship might be old, but she's modified for smuggling runs. I know a few tricks. He activated a hidden system, and the Wanderer's sensor profile immediately shifted, making the ship appear smaller and less significant on enemy scanners. It was a trick that had saved his life more than once during his younger, more reckless days. Interesting, Zara murmured, studying the modified readings. You've been more than just a simple traitor, haven't you? Marcus grinned despite their desperate situation. Everyone has secrets. The Inquisition ships spread out, trying to box them in, but Marcus knew these asteroid fields better than they did. He'd used this particular hiding spot before, during a run that had gone sideways with some very unhappy Hutt crime lords. There, he pointed to what looked like solid rock face ahead of them. Hidden entrance to an abandoned mining complex. We can lose them in the tunnels. Zara watched in amazement as Marcus flew directly at the asteroid wall, only to have a concealed opening iris open at the last second. The Wanderer shot through into a vast, hollowed-out chamber lit by emergency strips. The miners abandoned this place 50 years ago when the ore played out, Marcus explained, powering down to minimal systems. But they left most of the infrastructure intact, perfect for someone who needs to disappear for a while. Outside, they could hear the Inquisition ships searching the asteroid field, their sensor beams probing for any sign of their quarry. But the mining complex was shielded by dense metal deposits that would mask their presence. They'll give up. Eventually, Marcus said, settling back in his pilot's chair. Inquisition teams are thorough, but they can't search every asteroid in the field. Zara was looking at him with new eyes, seeing past the facade of the simple trader to the man beneath. Who are you really, Marcus Chen? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then activated another holographic display. This one showed a classified military file with his picture and service record. Captain Marcus Chen, Alliance Intelligence, he said quietly. Officially listed as killed in action during the siege of Proxima Station 3 years ago. Zara studied the file, her expression unreadable. Deep cover operative. No wonder you could afford my freedom. Intelligence pays well for successful missions. The 10 million was my retirement fund, Marcus admitted. I was supposed to be done with all this, settling down to the quiet life of a legitimate trader. What changed? Marcus looked at her, seeing not just the exotic beauty that had caught his attention at the auction, but the courage and determination that had kept her standing despite everything she'd endured. I saw someone who deserved better than what the galaxy was giving her, he said simply. And maybe I realized that some things are worth coming out of retirement for. Before Zara could respond, his comm system chimed with an encrypted message. Marcus's expression darkened as he read the transmission. What is it? Zara asked, noting his change in demeanor. My handler. It seems my death has been officially revoked. They want me back in the field for one last mission. Marcus looked up from the display, his face grim. They want me to bring you in, Zara. The Alliance has decided that Etherean political refugees could be valuable intelligence assets. The weight of betrayal hung between them like a physical presence. Zara's violet eyes went cold, and Marcus could see her preparing for another devastating loss of trust. "But here's the thing," Marcus continued, deleting the message without responding. "I don't work for them anymore. And if they want you, they'll have to go through me first." The spark of hope that rekindled in Zara's eyes was worth more than all the credits he'd spent at the auction. Outside the hidden mining complex, the Inquisition ships continued their search, unaware that their quarry was planning something far more dangerous than simple escape. Marcus opened a secure channel and began composing a message to his sister. If they were going to retrieve those data cores and stop the Great Silence, they'd need Sarah's experimental technology. And they'd need it fast, because Marcus had a feeling their enemies were just getting started. The research station orbiting Tau Ceti 7th looked more like a glorified medical clinic than the cutting-edge facility Marcus had described. Zara studied the modest structure through the Wanderer's viewport, her enhanced Etherean vision picking out details that would escape human perception, the subtle energy signatures of experimental equipment, the defensive grid that suggested more security than was immediately apparent. "Your sister works here?" she asked, noting the sparse traffic around the station. "Sarah prefers to keep a low profile," Marcus replied, guiding his ship toward the designated docking bay. "Neural research, especially the kind involving alien physiology, attracts the wrong kind of attention from various governments." 2 days had passed since their escape from the asteroid field. The Inquisition ships had eventually departed, but Marcus knew they wouldn't give up so easily. Intelligence networks across the galaxy would be buzzing with alerts about a human trader harboring an Etherean fugitive. The docking sequence completed with practiced efficiency, and Marcus led Zara through the station's sterile corridors. The medical facility was small, but impressively equipped, with neural mapping displays and surgical suites that rivaled anything Zara had seen in the Etherean Empire's finest hospitals. "Marcus!" a woman's voice called out as they entered the main laboratory. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged from behind a bank of quantum processors, her appearance marking her clearly as Marcus's sister despite the 20-year age difference. She had the same intelligent brown eyes and determined jawline, though her hair was streaked with premature gray from years of intensive research. "Sarah." Marcus embraced his sister warmly, then stepped back to make introductions. "I'd like you to meet Lady Zara Velnathi." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in Zara's distinctive Etherean features. "The 10 million credit purchase makes more sense now," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "Though I have to admit, when Marcus said he'd found someone who needed our help, I wasn't expecting royalty." "Former royalty," Zara corrected, accepting the handshake. "And currently, a fugitive from my own people." "All the more reason to help," Sarah replied with a smile that reminded Zara strongly of Marcus. "My brother has a weakness for lost causes and people who need saving." Marcus cleared his throat. "About that experimental neural interface technology we discussed?" "Ah, yes." Sarah's expression grew serious. "The theoretical application of cybernetic enhancement to restore severed psychic pathways. I'll be honest, it's never been attempted on an Etherean subject. The neural architecture of your species is far more complex than human brain structure." Zara felt a familiar stab of disappointment, but forced herself to remain hopeful. "What would be required?" Sarah gestured for them to follow her to a specialized examination chamber. "First, we'd need to map your existing neural pathways and identify exactly what was damaged during the severance process. Then we'd design custom interfaces to bridge the gaps and potentially stimulate regeneration of the psychic centers." The examination chamber contained equipment Zara didn't recognize. Sleek scanners that hummed with barely contained energy. Neural mapping arrays that looked more like works of art than medical devices. "The good news," Sarah continued as she began calibrating the scanners, "is that Etherean neural tissue shows remarkable plasticity. Your brains are essentially living quantum computers, capable of forming new connections at the molecular level." "And the bad news?" Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "The procedure would be incredibly dangerous. We'd essentially be rebuilding portions of her brain while she's conscious. General anesthesia would interfere with the neural mapping, and there's a significant chance that instead of restoring her abilities, we could cause permanent cognitive damage or death." Zara absorbed this information with characteristic composure, What are the odds of success? Sarah hesitated. Honestly, I'd estimate 30% chance of full restoration, 40% chance of partial success, and 30% chance of catastrophic failure. I'll take those odds, Zara said immediately. Wait, Marcus interjected. Maybe we should consider alternatives. There might be other ways to access your father's facility. Zara turned to face him, her violet eyes burning with determination. Marcus, billions of my people face enslavement or worse if the Circle of Minds proceeds with the Great Silence. Even if the odds were 1 in 100, I'd still have to try. Sarah watched this exchange with growing understanding. This isn't just about accessing some hidden data, is it? Marcus filled his sister in on the scope of the Etherean conspiracy, while Sarah ran preliminary scans of Zara's neural structure. The results appeared on holographic displays around the examination chamber, showing the intricate patterns of Etherean brain activity. Fascinating, Sarah murmured, studying the data. The severance was surgical in its precision. They didn't just damage your psychic centers. They created deliberate blockages in the neural pathways connecting them to your conscious mind. Meaning? Zara asked. Your abilities are still there, just locked away behind artificial barriers. It's like having a powerful computer with all the connections severed. The processing power exists, but it can't communicate with the rest of the system. Hope flared in Zara's chest for the first time since her capture. Can you remove the blockages? Possibly. But it would require implanting cybernetic interfaces directly into your brainstem and psychic centers. The technology exists, but Sarah trailed off, pulling up additional scans. But what? Marcus prompted. The implants would need to be bonded at the quantum level. Once installed, they become a permanent part of the subject's neural structure. There would be no going back. Zara considered this. What would be the long-term effects? Unknown, Sarah admitted. You'd be the first Etherean to undergo this procedure. The implants might enhance your natural abilities beyond their original levels, or they might limit them. You could experience side effects we can't predict. She'd be part machine, Marcus said quietly, understanding the implications. In a sense, yes. The interfaces would make her a hybrid, part biological, part technological. Some might consider that an abomination, Zara laughed, though there was little humor in the sound. My own people already consider me an abomination. At least this way, I might be able to fight back. Sarah looked between her brother and Zara, seeing the connection that had formed between them. There's something else you should know. The quantum bonding process creates permanent neural links between the implants and the subject's consciousness. In rare cases, these links have been known to extend beyond the individual. Meaning? Marcus asked. If someone else underwent a similar procedure, and if their neural patterns were compatible, they could share a psychic connection with Zara, a true mental bond. The implications hung in the air like electricity. Marcus felt something shift in his chest as he realized what Sarah was suggesting. You're talking about me getting implants too, he said. The thought had occurred to me, Sarah replied carefully. Your neural patterns show unusual compatibility with Etherean psychic frequencies, probably why you were drawn to each other in the first place. If you both underwent the procedure, you could potentially share abilities and communicate telepathically. Zara stared at Marcus in amazement. You would do that? Become part machine to help me? Marcus didn't hesitate. I told you at the auction, you're worth everything I have. That includes whatever's left of my purely human brain. Before Zara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Sarah rushed to the main console, her face paling as she read the incoming alerts. We have company, she announced grimly. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. The signatures match Etherean Inquisition vessels. Marcus cursed under his breath. They must have traced us through intelligence channels. How long before they board? 20 minutes, maybe less, Sarah replied, already moving toward emergency storage units. But that's not our only problem. I'm also detecting Alliance ships taking positions around the station. They're working together, Zara realized, her tactical mind immediately grasping the situation. The Empire and the Alliance have made some kind of deal. Marcus's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display showed a familiar face, Commander Harrison Webb, Marcus's former handler. Hello, Marcus, Webb's image said with cold efficiency. I trust you received our previous communication. Time to come in from the cold. I'm retired, remember? Marcus replied, though he was already calculating escape routes. Your retirement was predicated on staying out of galactic politics. Harboring an Etherean fugitive rather violates that agreement. Webb's expression grew harder. The Empire has offered significant concessions in exchange for Lady Velnathi's return. Too significant to refuse. What kind of concessions? Zara asked, stepping into view of the comm pickup. Webb's eyes widened slightly at seeing her, but his voice remained professional. Expanded trade agreements, access to Etherean psychic enhancement technology, joint military cooperation against threats in the Outer Rim. Your people drive a hard bargain, Lady Velnathi. They're not my people anymore, Zara replied coldly. And whatever they've promised you, the cost will be higher than you imagine. That's for our diplomatic corps to determine. You have 15 minutes to surrender peacefully, or we begin boarding procedures. The transmission ended, leaving them in tense silence. Options? Marcus asked. Sarah was already moving, pulling equipment from emergency storage. I can perform a modified version of the neural procedure. Simplified, faster, but with reduced chances of success and higher risk of complications. How much higher? Zara demanded. 60% chance of catastrophic failure, Sarah admitted. But it's better than certain capture. Marcus looked at Zara, seeing the determination in her violet eyes. Your choice. No, Zara said firmly. Our choice. If we're doing this, we do it together. Sarah nodded grimly. Then we need to move fast. The procedure will take at least 10 minutes per subject, and will be vulnerable the entire time. As they rushed toward the surgical suite, Marcus's mind raced through contingency plans. Even if the procedure succeeded, they'd still need to escape a joint Etherean alliance blockade and somehow reach Kepler 442b. Sarah, he said as his sister began preparing the neural interfaces, after this is over, you need to disappear. Go dark, change your identity. They'll come after you for helping us. I know, she replied, her hands steady despite the circumstances. I've been preparing for this possibility ever since I started the research. There are people who need this technology. People the governments would rather see remain broken. Zara lay back on the surgical table, watching the cybernetic interfaces, being prepared. They looked deceptively simple. Thin crystalline filaments barely visible to the naked eye. But she could sense the quantum processing power contained within their molecular structure. Ready? Sarah asked, positioning the neural crown that would guide the implantation process. Zara reached out and took Marcus's hand, their fingers interlocking naturally. Ready. As the first interface made contact with her brainstem, Zara's world exploded into sensation. She could feel her severed neural pathways awakening, quantum connections forming at impossible speeds. And beneath it all, growing stronger, by the second, was something she hadn't felt since her capture, the song of her people, faint but unmistakable. The procedure was agony and ecstasy combined, like being reborn at the molecular level. Through the haze of sensation, she became aware of Marcus on the table beside her, his mind opening to psychic frequencies for the first time. And then, suddenly, she could feel him. Not just his physical presence, but his thoughts, his emotions, his absolute commitment to seeing this through regardless of the cost. Can you hear me? His mental voice whispered across their newly formed bond. I can hear you, she replied, wonder coloring her thoughts. Marcus, I can feel everything. The station, the ships outside even. She stopped, her consciousness expanding beyond the medical facility to touch something vast and terrible approaching through hyperspace. Ships beyond counting, their psychic signatures blazing with the cold fury of the Etherean Inquisition's full battle fleet. They're not just here for me, she realized with growing horror. This is an invasion force. Outside the station, the first Alliance ships began powering their weapons, unaware that they had just invited the wolves into the fold. The Great Silence, it seemed, had begun ahead of schedule. The neural interfaces completed their integration as the station shuddered under enemy fire. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he'd ever imagined. touching Zara's mind in ways that transcended mere telepathy. Through their bond, he experienced her memories. The fall of House Velnathi, the brutal severance ceremony, the months of imprisonment, but also her unbreakable spirit that had kept her standing through it all. The approaching fleet, Zara's mental voice carried urgent warning as her restored abilities perceived the massive Etherean force emerging from hyperspace. It's not just an invasion. They're carrying severance equipment. They plan to sever every psychic species in this sector. Through their shared consciousness, Marcus felt the scope of the Circle's plan. The Great Silence wasn't limited to Ethereans. It was a galaxy-wide project to eliminate independent thought from any species capable of resisting their mental domination. "We need to leave now," Sarah announced as she monitored the station's failing systems. "The neural procedure worked, but both Alliance and Etherean forces are converging on our position." Marcus helped Zara to her feet, marveling at how naturally their movements synchronized despite their enhanced connection being only minutes old. Through their bond, he could feel her restored abilities flowing like water after a drought, tentative at first, then stronger as the cybernetic interfaces fully integrated with her neural patterns. "I can feel them," she whispered in wonder, her consciousness reaching out to touch the approaching ships. "My people's minds, trapped in patterns of obedience, but also resistance. There are those who remember what freedom felt like." The station's alarms reached a crescendo as the first enemy ships entered weapons range. But as they rushed toward the docking bay, Zara suddenly stopped, her enhanced senses detecting something that made her gasp. "Marcus, one of the rebel ships. It's broadcasting an old Etherean resistance code. Captain Lyrian Vesitar is alive." "The noble who opposed the Circle?" Marcus asked, feeling her surge of hope through their bond. "She was my mentor before the Purge. If she's leading a resistance cell..." Their escape to the Wanderer became a desperate race as Etherean boarding parties breached the station's outer hull. But Zara's restored precognitive abilities guided them through the maze of corridors, while Marcus's enhanced reflexes helped them avoid patrol sweeps. As they reached their ship, Marcus felt Zara's consciousness expand even further, touching not just the station's systems, but the rebel vessel hiding in the asteroid field's shadows. "Lyrian," she projected with psychic intensity that would have been impossible before her enhancement. "This is Zara Velnathi. We have evidence of the Circle's plans." The response came immediately, not through comm channels, but as a direct mind-to-mind contact that bypassed all electronic surveillance. "Little star," came the warm mental voice of Captain Vesistar. "I felt your awakening across the void. Your father would be proud." As the Wanderer launched from the dying station, 3 ships rose from the asteroid field to escort them. Sleek Etherean vessels marked with the insignia of noble houses that had supposedly been destroyed years ago. "The resistance is larger than the Circle knows," Lyrian explained, as their small fleet jumped to hyperspace. "We've been waiting for someone who could access your father's data. Someone the ancient defenses would accept." The journey to Kepler 442b took 2 days, during which Marcus learned the true scope of what they faced. The Circle of Minds hadn't just seized control of the Etherean Empire. They had spent decades infiltrating other governments, preparing for a coordinated strike that would leave every major species vulnerable to psychic domination. But they made one crucial error, Zara observed as they studied the intelligence Lyrian's resistance had gathered. They assumed that severed Ethereans would remain broken. They never considered that our abilities might be restored through hybrid technology. When they finally reached the dead world where her father had hidden his evidence, Marcus understood why the ancient Vortans had chosen to make their final stand here. The planet itself was a weapon. Every crystal formation, every ruined spire, all of it designed to amplify psychic energy and turn it against invaders. The hidden facility responded to Zara's presence immediately. Ancient Vorthan. Technology recognizing the hybrid nature of her enhanced abilities. As data cores activated throughout the vast chamber, Marcus felt the weight of accumulated evidence. Not just proof of the Circle's crimes, but detailed plans for stopping them. The severance technology has a fatal flaw. The Vorthan consciousness, explained through crystalline interfaces that predated written history. It creates quantum resonance patterns that can be reversed. Every severed mind can be restored. And when they are, they'll remember everything that was done to them. We can free them all, Zara breathed, her violet eyes blazing with possibility. Every severed Etherean, every suppressed psychic species. They'll become our allies instead of the Circle's victims. But even as hope flared, their enhanced senses detected new threats approaching. The Circle's hunter-killers had found the planet, and this time they brought overwhelming force. We don't have time for a conventional data transfer, Marcus realized as enemy ships entered the system. But there might be another way. Through their bond, he felt Zara understand his plan. Instead of copying the data, they could become it. Merge their consciousness with the Vorthon archives and carry the knowledge within their own enhanced minds. The risk, she began, is worth it, he finished. For the chance to free every enslaved mind in the galaxy. The merger with the Vorthon consciousness was unlike anything either of them had experienced. Suddenly they carried not just evidence of the Circle's crimes, but the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization. Battle strategies, technological secrets, and most importantly, the location of every severance facility the Circle had built. As enemy forces landed outside the facility, Marcus and Zara emerged transformed. They moved with the fluid precision of Vorthon warriors. Their consciousness expanded to encompass tactical awareness that spanned star systems. The battle for the facility was brief but decisive. Enhanced by ancient knowledge and fighting as one mind in two bodies, they carved through the hunter-killers like avatars of vengeance. But their real weapon wasn't physical. It was the liberation signal they broadcast on every psychic frequency, carrying the reversal codes for severance technology. Across the galaxy, severed minds began to awaken. It's working, Zara gasped as they felt the psychic shockwaves spreading from world to world. They're remembering, they're angry, and they're fighting back. The Circle's response was swift and brutal. Orbital bombardments of rebel worlds, mass executions, desperate attempts to silence the growing uprising. But it was too late. The liberation signal had reached too many. Minds awakened too much suppressed rage. On Etherios itself, the noble houses rose in open rebellion. On a dozen colony worlds, severed populations turned on their oppressors with fury that had been building for years. And throughout human space, Alliance forces began to understand how thoroughly they had been manipulated. The Circle is falling. Lyrian's mental voice reached them across the light years, carrying savage satisfaction. But Valdris Morthak has retreated to the deep core with what remains of the Loyalist fleet. He's threatening to detonate consciousness bombs that could destroy entire star systems. Marcus felt the weight of decisions settling on his shoulders. They had the power to stop Valdris. The Vorthon knowledge included techniques that could turn his own weapons against him. But it would require a sacrifice that went beyond anything they had given before. Together, Zara's mental voice was steady. With resolve, whatever the cost, we face it together. The final confrontation took place in the deep core, where ancient stars burned with the fires of creation. Valdris had turned his flagship into a mobile severance facility, threatening to erase the consciousness of every free mind in the galaxy unless the rebellion surrendered. But when Marcus and Zara arrived with their small fleet of rebels and Vorthon-enhanced ships, they brought something Valdris had never faced. Unified resistance backed by the accumulated defiance of multiple civilizations. The psychic battle that followed raged across dimensions that had no names. Consciousness clashing with consciousness, in patterns that rewrote the quantum structure of space itself. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth that Valdris had never understood. Love was stronger than fear. Choice was more powerful than compulsion. And freedom, once tasted, could never be truly taken away. When the silence of eternity finally fell, its consciousness bombs turning inward to destroy the severance technology that had enslaved so many, the galaxy breathed free for the first time in millennia. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching ships from a dozen species dock peacefully with the galaxy's first truly integrated spaceport. The station had been built from the wreckage of Circle facilities, transformed from instruments of oppression into symbols of cooperation. Admiring your investment? Zara asked as she joined him, her presence in his mind as natural as breathing. Despite all they had endured, Our investment, he corrected, pulling her close. Through their bond, he felt her amusement at his continued insistence on sharing credit for decisions she still considered magnificently reckless. The Etherean Empire had fragmented into dozens of independent states, while humanity had emerged as a major galactic power. Species that had been enslaved for generations were rediscovering their own cultures and abilities. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still those who yearned for the old certainties of absolute rule. But it was free. Sarah's research is making remarkable progress, Zara observed, nodding toward the medical wing where his sister worked with teams of scientists from multiple species. The hybrid consciousness techniques we developed are helping severed minds recover faster than anyone thought possible. Marcus smiled, thinking of all the lives that would be rebuilt, all the potential that would be unlocked. The 10 million credits he'd spent at that auction had seemed enormous at the time. But compared to what they'd gained, what the galaxy had gained, it was the bargain of several lifetimes. Speaking of bargains, Zara's mental voice carried playful mischief as she produced a small data pad. I've been monitoring the auction circuits. There's an interesting lot coming up on Nexus Station next week. Marcus raised an eyebrow as he read the listing. A collection of pre-war Vorthon artifacts? Zara, we already have access to their entire civilization through our enhanced consciousness. It's not about the artifacts, she explained with the patient tone of someone explaining the obvious to a particularly dense student. It's about the principle. These pieces belong in a museum, not in some private collector's vault. Marcus felt his grin spreading as he understood what she was really suggesting. You want to go back to where this all started. I want to go back with you, she corrected. As partners, as equals, as two people who learned that the most valuable things in the universe can't actually be bought. Through their bond, he felt the depth of what she meant. They had found something at that auction that no amount of credits could purchase. A connection that had survived enhancement, transformation, and battles that reshaped the galaxy. How much are we planning to bid this time? He asked, already calculating their available resources. Zara's smile was radiant as she leaned in for a kiss that still made his enhanced heart race. Everything we have, she whispered against his lips. Just like always. As New Harmony Station turned slowly in space, carrying the hopes and dreams of a dozen liberated species, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd started as a simple trader looking for a quiet retirement. Now he was part of something that spanned civilizations, a hybrid consciousness that served as bridge between species, protector of the free, and reminder that even the mightiest tyrants could fall to those brave enough to pay freedom's price. But at its heart, it was still just two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of places and decided that some things were worth risking everything for. Ready for the next adventure? Zara asked through their bond as they watched ships from across the galaxy dock with the station. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the future stretching before them, unknown, challenging, but no longer constrained by the fears of those who would. Silence-free thought. With you? He replied, his mental voice carrying all the love and determination that had started with an impossible bid at a seedy auction. Always. In the end, that 10 million credit purchase had been exactly what Marcus claimed, the best investment he'd ever made. Not because of what it bought, but because of what it had set free, and that, he thought as Zara laughed at some private joke echoing through their shared consciousness, was worth more than all the credits in the galaxy. The end up next. You've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us!